and Sarah, and it's showtime. So we're going to get started. Don't want to waste anybody's time. We'll be here 75 minutes or so, depending. We can try to do some discussion toward the end. My name is Steve Klass. My contact information is on the screen here. I'm the executive director of P3 Utah, Business for People, Planet, and Profit. We are starting to enter our second decade. We're the greatest nonprofit you probably haven't heard of, promoting business sustainability in the Intermountain West. And we do associate with the American Sustainable Business Council, although we're an independent 501c3. Can't wait to get going today. I'm going to try to move the slide deck forward, and we'll get started here. So this session today with Deven Patton, who's going to be introduced in just a moment here, and he'll do most of the talking. This is part of a series we decided to do to work our way back to normal. I know some of you are already doing normal, but some of us are more virtual than we used to be before the pandemic. So we decided that we would do these webinars. We focused on benefit companies, but not all companies in Utah that do wonderful things. In fact, most companies in Utah that have a really great triple bottom line program promoting people and planet alongside profit are not benefit companies. And a good example is Young Living, and that's who we're working with today. But you can see we've had a few of these sessions. And as I was telling Sarah and Deven before Liz and Steve arrived, we're going to put up recordings of about 6 of these from April 20th onward on our website, p3utah.org. We'll put this in our newsletter. If you're not getting our newsletter, send me an email. sklass@p3utah.org, or use contact off our website. We'll get you on the email list, and that's where you know what we're doing. Hope Zach is joining soon. Onward. And no one's on the call today from VIRIDESCENT, but I want you to know that this program is a partnership with Impact Hub Salt Lake, and we have a hosting sponsor for this fall who sets up our Zoom calls and records these calls so that we can share them in a legacy format later. And that's VIRIDESCENT is a very interesting new organization in the sustainability world, and here's their contact information. And now, I don't hear a drum roll, and Devin's not going to do it because it's embarrassing to do his own drum roll. Today, we are presenting Sustainability Beyond Startup with Deven Patton of Young Living. And for those of you that went to Eventbrite and signed up, you read Deven's bio, but just so you know, he's been at Young Living for a while, for several years. And before that, a little bit at New Skin. He has other work experience. And very exciting for us in Utah, he's one of the first chief sustainability officers that I've come across who actually has a master's degree in sustainability management. And so, he brings a lot more tools than a lot of us do as self-taught sustainability leaders. And we're so pleased to have a chance to debrief him, ask him about what's going on at Young Living. We're going to talk about all these great things, top to bottom, getting a handle on the big picture, scheduling projects, how to build out a program, how to engage stakeholders, working with top management, partners, and how those of you who are not yet a chief sustainability officer but would like to be one, how maybe you can follow in Deven's footsteps. So that's some of what we're going to talk about today. Deven, we're just going to start moving into your slides here. So you can say more about yourself. You can just jump into the golden circle.
Okay, well, thank you, Steve. I'm happy to be here today and share a little bit of my learnings. I would hope that, as time permits, we may have some time for some conversation at the end here. I've got just a few things to share. Like Steve said, we're on our list of bullet points there, share some insights, share some thoughts. If you do have questions that pop up, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and as time permits, we'll try and answer them at the end. So again, a little bit about me. I work for Young Living Essential Oils based in Lehi, Utah here. I've been with the organization for 5 years. I've been in my role as Director of Environmental Sustainability now for 3 years. And although the organization has been around for almost 30 years or 28 years. We've only had a formal sustainability program for the last 3 years. So it's a little bit of an interesting learning experience. I'll share some of my thoughts with you on that. So we can jump into that first slide there. So one of the first things that Steve wanted me to share a little bit about is getting a handle on the bigger picture. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Simon Sinek. He's a great leadership thought leader on leadership, and he's got this great TED Talk that came out in 2009 all about the golden circle. And the golden circle is the way that we storytell, the way that we market, but it's also the way that we think. And he talks about this golden circle, how we start with why. And I want to share a little bit about how my role began at Young Living, and how we were able to zoom out, if you will, and look at the big picture and then really determine where we're going to start. And a lot of my thought came from this idea of the golden circle, is to, we need to really dig down to our own purpose. And from that purpose, you can then start to figure out, well, how are you going to attack it? And then what are your actions? Whereas a lot of the times we fall into that pitfall of trying to start with what and how, and the why will come at the end. A lot of us, we're wired for that as humans, is to be a problem solver. And the problem solver starts with what? What are we going to do? What are we going to do it? Then how are we going to do that? And in order for us to really figure out our sustainability program, we had to stop, think about why we're doing what we're doing, and really dive into our mission and vision. So to give you an idea of that, Steve, go ahead and hit that next slide there, please. And I'll share a little bit about my personal why, how I got to where I'm at. And then I can dive a little bit more into Young Living as well. So this is my personal why, the pictures you see here on the slide. This is my family. I've got 4 crazy boys at home, and my amazing wife that helps wrangle all of us. She loves having a boy household. This is my why. My why is to support my family and give them the best life I possibly can. And so then I start to think about, well, how am I going to do that? And what are the actions of that? So that brings me to the picture on the right here of this beautiful glacial lake. If you're familiar with the Wind River Range in Wyoming, this is a lake just underneath Gannett Peak. Gannett Peak is the tallest peak within Wyoming. It's 14,000 feet. In 2014, my brother-in-law and I and a good friend, we decided to go on a backpacking trip, and we wanted to hike to Gannett Peak. At that time, I was come to a point in my career where I had been working in a direct sales company for several years, and I was to the point where I couldn't really advance further. I had finished an undergraduate, but hadn't figured out what I wanted to do in terms of graduate program. And so I took that entire week of sitting at this beautiful lake and really thinking about my why and what I want to be doing with my career and my life. And I drew back on all my experience. I'm a native of Utah, and I absolutely love the outdoors. Obviously, I do a lot of backpacking, hiking, fishing, hunting, all that type of stuff. And I started to think about how I want to be able to have my kids and their kids and their kids have these similar type of experiences, to be able to enjoy these amazing environments. And so I decided I'm going to go into business sustainability. I had made contact a week before with the folks at Arizona State University, where I did my master's program. And they had announced this really exciting new program in sustainability leadership that Steve alluded to. And so I ended up enrolling in the program after this week of just deciding on my why. And long story short, I'm here with Young Living. After I finished the program, I decided to move to a new organization that more closely aligned with my why. And that ended up being Young Living. So we can go ahead and move forward to the next slide there, please, Steve.
Which I'm trying to do. And
it may take a second. Liz, I see your comment. You're a graduate student in ASU's MSL program. Amazing program. I graduated there. It was 2016. I was part of that cohort, and I love what the program is doing. It's evolved several times. Mine was the EMSL, but that's really set me up to where I'm at now. The course really focuses on sustainability leadership. It's not the science. It's not the what and the how. It's the why, and it's the strategy behind it, and I love that. So let me get back to Young Living a little bit and tell you a little bit about how we got to handle in the bigger picture. At the organization, we sat down and looked at what is our why? What do we do? What's our mission and vision? And our mission and vision is really to connect people with nature, to bring them to help them connect with the energy, the natural energy of the earth. And so I've got these photos here of our lavender farms and what that means to get people connected to these plants, these products. It just so happens that, we sell an essential oil, but our founder was very much devoted to getting people to feel nature and feel the healing powers, or to feel the natural energy that is therein. So that's our why, and I love that, because that resonates a lot with my personal why. So from there, I was able to start to build on those two ideas that connecting people to nature, and that's where we really started our sustainability program. So we can get people to really appreciate and understand why we need to take these actions. So the next part of what we kind of wanted to talk a little bit about is, so we're this big organization, we've been around 25 years when we founded this sustainability program. And so, where do we go? What do we do now? We've created a sustainability team. We've got a lot of tasks we want to jump into. So how do we start to break up those large challenges and kind of more manageable projects? For those of you that are familiar with the materiality assessment, that's really where I started. We sat down and looked at all the material topics to Young Living, looked at our entire supply chain, looked at our employees, looked at our facilities, our farms. The unique thing about Young Living is we have the farmland vertically integrated into our supply chain. So we own a bunch of our own land that we farm, we plant the seed, we harvest the material, the biomass. So after completing the materiality assessment, we can then start to look at, what's the impact of the organization, what's the impact of the consumer, plot those different material topics there, and really get an idea of what our low-hanging fruit are and what our longer aspirational goals were. Had a question here come in. I will describe the team in just a minute, Zach, absolutely. After we complete that materiality assessment, as I was saying, we were able to then determine, our low-hanging fruit, what are the very quick and easy projects that we could dive into, and what are some of the bigger ones. Steve, if you want to advance that next slide, this is an example of one of those projects that is a bigger one, but is an interesting one when the slide pulls up. So we just 2 years ago moved into a new facility in Lehigh. If you've been driving it down I-15 at all and seen it there off to the east of the freeway in Lehigh, it's this big white building, Young Living out, it's got a giant leaf and the big symbol out front. This building has both Green Globe and LEED certifications on it. It's an amazing building. It's got on-site solar. The image, if it pulls up here, is a water filtration system. Yeah, thank you. The water at this facility internally is better than most hospitals, and I think the only facilities that really rival it are those that are bottling like refined water. Why did we do this? Again, this is something that kind of drove from our why, is that our founders wanted the facility to be the very best possible, especially for employees and those that are within the facility. Just another one of the examples of these projects that we were able to say, the impact of this internally is great to us, and we feel that it's something we need to attack. Go ahead and hit that next slide there, if you would, please.
Is this the next one?
Yes, thank you.
Good.
So after we were looking at materiality assessment again, if we were able to, like I said, plot out and make a several-year plan on what we wanted to be doing, and the areas we need to attack. So one of the other questions here, or the topics that we wanted to hit on, is scheduling projects to get our strategic movement in. And that kind of goes hand in hand with that materiality assessment for us. We were able to look at it, and once we determine what topics are the most material for us, we could then do some analyses on ROI, impact, what the lift is, what kind of stakeholder involvement we're going to be needing, and really dive into those. So this is an example. This photo here is our field out in Mona. If you've ever driven south of Utah Valley, we have a farm there that is mostly our lavender. Most of the lavender fields currently are being irrigated with the big arm sprinkler that just goes out over the field and sprays. But as we started looking at it, especially with Utah's arid climate, we determined that water was a huge material topic for us, and we needed to look at water security. So we started exploring how we could be far more efficient with our water and make sure that anything we are using water on, it's used, it gets to the plant, and we don't have a lot of waste. So this is a photo of some of the drip irrigation testing we've been doing for our farms, to try and make sure that any water we're delivering is getting right to the plant, it isn't just being evaporated or wasted off. This actually has, it's a pretty expensive project to go out and change these big arm sprinklers into drip lines, because not only you have to install the drip, but then the maintenance of them is far greater than that of the big lines. But we found that it's far more efficient for us. We're saving crazy amounts of water, and as we know, Utah's been in drought the last couple of years. Doesn't look like that's changing anytime soon, despite all the water we've received the last couple of weeks. But we wanted to make sure and ensure that we could be continuing to water our fields for years to come. Another example of some of those strategic initiatives, we looked at water again and said, we have a distillery. The distilleries use large amounts of water because once this material is harvested from these plants, it's put into a giant vat, essentially crock pot. It's compressed, steam is passed through that. The steam pulls out the oils out of the plant, goes through a condenser, a chiller, and the water and the steam are separated out. Historically, that water called floral water has just been put into a holding pond. It cools. Once it cools, it can then just be dumped back into the environment, is what a lot of organizations have done. We looked at that process and said, that's horribly wasteful. That's a ton of water that goes out that if it's not cooled and if the the chemical constituency of that water is not the right pH, the right balance, it can actually be a hazardous waste. You dump that back into like a reservoir and you can cause algae blooms, you can cause lots of other issues. So we began to look at that, and we created a recirculation program that takes that floral water, recirculates it a few times, and then we're able to then put it into our irrigation systems and irrigate our crops with it. That program saved over 270 million gallons of water annually in Utah, which is a big deal for us. It's enough to irrigate several hundred more acres, which is pretty crazy to think about. But that was, as we started looking at that, again, that assessment, determining water is the biggest issue, we had to make sure that that was one of the things we wanted to move on first. That was one of our priorities. Other priorities, obviously, are around our farms, a lot of regenerative practices, things like that. So any questions before I move on to that?
Did you save enough water to offset the additional cost of setting it up, or will you in a few years offset that cost?
Yeah, we will, absolutely. Most of the programs we've looked at, or the projects we've looked at in terms of ROI, historical with other supply chain projects, you're a 5 to 7 year payoff on them. Some are more or quicker, some are not. Utah has the unique situation to where our water is fairly cheap. And so the payoff on that's a little longer, but for us, the security, it's one of those benefits that's a little harder to measure, but we feel that it's absolutely worth it. As we were, as I was saying, in a year of drought, that can make or break a crop. And if we know we're saving this, a crazy amount of water that we can put back to our fields, that's definitely worth it for us.
Try that slide.
All right.
Oh my goodness, it worked.
Hey, it worked. All right. So Liz, I believe, was it Liz that you'd asked a little bit about or Zach, describing a team. I have a mighty team of 3, myself and 2 others. I can tackle a few of the bullet points here, and we'll repeat as necessary. One of the obstacles I'll say that we've had as a small team starting out is obviously we're small, and the organization isn't willing to necessarily put out a lot of money into terms of salaries and growing a team like this very quickly. So we had to learn how to be very efficient starting off. And I actually relied on 2 interns for quite a while to do a lot of our work. The photo here is one of our projects. We were doing waste audits at our facilities. This is our farm in Mona. And so myself and our interns ended up doing this waste audit, which is going around emptying all the garbage cans under this tarp, parsing out everything into the different materials, weighing it, documenting what it was, going to the next dumpster. And we're able to build our team based on some of these results. I was able to keep a logbook of everything that my team had done over the last year when I was working with just 2 interns. These were student interns. They were paid intern rates, so it wasn't even a part-time rate. And I was able to display to the organization the impact of that. And then from there, we were very able to build a case to create a couple of full-time roles, because I had those interns working about 30 hours a week, depending on whatever they wanted, what their school schedule permitted, but up to 30 hours. And we still had work for them to do. So it was a very fun experience to have to figure this all out. But again, it is a great example of how we had to be super efficient with what we were doing. Does that answer your question there, Zach? As of right now, we're still a team of 3, but I have a full-time manager and I have a full-time coordinator. My manager works a lot as a program manager, essentially, and will help manage some of our communications, our education programs. We do a lot with employee engagement. I can hit on that here in just a minute. Our coordinator does a lot of our data and impact assessments. So from things like this waste assessment or this waste audit that you see, we're able to record reductions. We've done this now 3 times since implementing a pretty robust recycling program. And we were able to get rid of an open top dumpster that was, I think it was $11,000 a year for the contract for just our waste that we were hauling out of there, going to a landfill. We managed to ditch that contract completely. Almost all of the waste is going out through a company called Recyclops. They're a local rural recycling hauler, which is great. They started in Utah because there's a lot of communities that don't have curbside. But they will take almost all of our waste. There's just a little bit of waste that we still haul off, and it is now going through them for burnt energy, waste energy. But yeah, just a great opportunity to share to the organization, saying, hey, here's the cost savings per year on these small projects that we've been doing with interns, and we're able to build up the case for full-time staff.
Deven, what's a good place in our talk today to talk about the student team that I
this is a great time, because I think that's another opportunity to share with the organization that there's ways that we can embark on these projects for little or no cost. So I had the great opportunity to work with Steve and a couple of interns from BYU to do some work on evaluating what the impact to Young Living would be if we were to go and certify as a certified B Corp or a Utah Benefit Corp. Steve, you want to talk a little bit more about how the program worked for you?
Well, no, just that we were looking for P3 Utah has been trying to figure out how to, as a lot of people on the call are trying to do, and Deven does, how do we help businesses that don't have a sustainability program kind of embrace the triple bottom line? How can they systematically look at the comprehensive big picture of people, planet, and the profit aspect of sustainability? And so Deven was kind enough to allow 2 interns to practice going into his company and assessing the impact that Young Living was having consciously on the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, which is these are becoming more important as 2030 gets closer. And we have these global climate change summits where people try to embrace these goals. And so I'm going to let Deven respond in a minute about how helpful it was. But the students learned a lot, looking at a large company with a small staff trying to grasp everything. And I think Deven, they may have helped Deven with an employee survey to kind of see where employees were connecting to the triple bottom line. And then, I think, it's up to a company, not students, of course, to decide what steps it can take and where it can make greater progress. That's one of the reasons I wanted Deven to visit with all of you today and record his thinking, because he is trying to, reach high, and I guess we call it in boxing, we call it punch above your weight, but, really have great leverage for his small staff. It's kind of our theme with this whole presentation today. And I hope the students were helpful, a helpful mirror for Deven and his team.
Absolutely, they were helpful to answer that question. Extremely helpful. There's a few ways in which they really boosted what I wanted to be able to do in my role in the organization. Number one, I had been thinking about Benefit Corp. In fact, the team I was reporting through, so you're aware of kind of how it looked when we started. I was actually reporting up through our legal team, believe it or not, and that's because the organization was so new to this, they didn't quite know where to have it rest. And the in-house counsel that I was reporting through was trying to live a zero waste lifestyle of his own. He was just very dedicated, very passionate about it. And he had come one day and said, "Hey, I've heard about this B Corp thing. What is it?" And so I started to explain a little bit to him, and that's right about the same time that I met Steve, and I said, hey, we've got this great opportunity that we can have these interns come in and help us run through a mock of the B Corp assessment, and see where we might fall if we were to try and certify, and what we would need to do to meet the requirements of B Corp certification. It was a great exercise for them to run through the survey with us, show us where we were weak, what areas we were weak in, what areas we were stronger in, and where we could improve, or what changes we need to have. And it was an excellent opportunity to take that information to our executive team and share with them, hey, here's what B Corp means. Here's how close or how far we are off of that certification. If that's not the direction the organization wanted to go, we could then talk a little bit about Benefit Corp, the Utah Benefit Corp, and talk about some of the similarities and differences there as well. On the note of the interns, I am by no means the know all be all expert in all things sustainability here. I'm learning just as well as all of you, and I love the opportunity that these students that are in a program trying to work towards, hopefully a career in some aspect of environmental sustainability, that they have this experience. They could see what, it might look like in an organization, get some ideas of if they were to be in a similar role, what they might do the same, what they might change. I think that's really where the power lies in all of us as sustainability professionals, is where we can learn from each other and try and grow together. We don't all have the luxury of working for like a Kate Brandt of Google or those from Adobe or Apple that have billions and billions of dollars at their fingertips for their sustainability efforts. Most of us have very little teams or just trying to build this within the organization. And I think this opportunity to network with folks like this and work with a program, a student intern program, is far beyond any value you'd get from other outlets, other consultancies at the time. And for the dollar, it's unbeatable, in my opinion.
Well, not to put you on the spot, but to put you on the spot, Deven. So what are the barriers or the challenges in, moving into registration as a benefit corporation in Utah, and then maybe reaching for the certified B Corp? Is that something conceptually possible? Is the legal team still scratching its head? I don't want to point fingers at anybody, but I hear that a lot.
Yeah, no, there's some of the concerns from my experience. There's some governance pieces so we're a privately held company. We're not publicly held. And as a privately held company, there's some privacy that the company appreciates. And some of the things of the governance in terms of corporate structure, pay, those areas were difficult for our legal group to get behind. There's still some of those pieces that we're discussing at a little bit higher level. Our entire executive suite actually has turned over in the last year. Wow. So we've had some major leadership changes in the organization. So that's another hurdle I've been trying to overcome, is just reacquainting all the leadership with what we had been working on. I was very fortunate in that our company president was extremely passionate about conservation specifically and zero waste specifically. Those were two things in his mind that he was gung-ho about, and he wanted to do everything we possibly could to get to those, to contribute to either conservation of species and environments, or to get towards a zero waste status. And in his mind, Benefit Corp would have been the next logical step. We've had some setbacks, obviously, with this new change of leadership, and are working through that right now. So again, the governance piece is a big part of that. Some of the changes in legal structure, I think, are what some of the more hangups are for our legal team.
See, what's interesting, and not to go into too much depth in this call, but I'm glad you're pointing this out. I think it's a real challenge here in Utah. The benefit corporation registration option was designed so the companies wouldn't have to change their governance structure or their accounting systems. And you don't have to report, unlike B Corp certification, you don't have to deal with the issue of how much are the higher ups being paid versus the lower down employees. It's more a matter of embracing that triple bottom line and producing an annual benefit report, and the structure of which you have a lot of freedom in how you do that. And I think the B Corp certification, I think a lot of people think, well, I have to share my trade secrets or I have to show confidential information. And I don't think you do. I think that's also designed to protect company trade secrets and salary information. All you have to do, there's a question on the B Corp certification of does your highest paid employee make, I can't remember what it is, more than 6 times or 30 times or whatever it is, your lowest paid employee. And if you can't answer that in the affirmative, you don't get those points. But the fact that you don't get those points doesn't mean you can't certify, because for people on the call that don't know this, and I think Zach has done the test, so he knows all about it. And Liz and Steve and Sarah may know about this, but the B Corp certification is a really hard take-home test with 240 points, and you only need to get 80 points to certify. It's the only test you'll ever take where getting a 40% correct response allows you to pass the test. It's made really hard, but no one's expected to answer all those questions positively. So I think a lot of people get hung up on the things that they can't answer, but a company can certify without that. So that's my, Deven, you've had those in-depth discussions, but I think there are just a lot of, it's hard to give busy executives, the kind of exposure to these tools so that they can really appreciate that they don't give up privacy and they don't give up control.
Yeah. And a lot of that, falls on the shoulders of me and my team. It's in how we, and I use this term a lot in sustainability, but it's not like a marketing term, but I talk about storytelling. And the whole idea behind storytelling is just how you convey information that is motivating and memorable. If you can't convey information that way to where it's motivating and memorable, then they're just going to forget about it or not be interested. And I think that's a big part of how we can get this new leadership team on board. If you're familiar with the hero's journey, I know of storytelling, this is a big one that I love the idea behind, but this is every major story in history that is a memorable one, or that you can think of that is just it always sticks in your mind, follows the same hierarchy. And so that's, as we work on different projects, and I didn't mention this and I should have a little bit better, but as we talk about how to get people on board and help them understand the big picture and where they need to put their resources, we try and put these projects and the need for them into this story framework, this story template, so that we can get them on board and excited, and keep it memorable, keep it top of mind. Our executives are extremely busy, and so for us to bring another project to them, it just falls in line on, here's the priority list. Sales are always going to be the priority for a for-profit company. Everything else is going to fall below that. And if we're not, bringing a project that's directly linked to boosting sales, it falls down somewhere below. And so how do we get that to stay on their priority list to be addressed? And that's right now what we're battling with.
Yeah, well, and it's certainly one of, I'm glad we're talking about it. It's one of our talking points, and you may hit that some more in terms of engaging employees, engaging top management. I'm looking for other questions in the chat and don't see it. So okay. Everybody's just wise about that. Here's another, well, we just saw a new one. Zach loves to ask questions.
Man, Zach asking the hard ones. He asked, where do we draw the line between Young Living's footprints and all of its MLM partners? And Zach, I'll see if I can answer this a little bit. If I'm not going the right way, let me know for sure. We're most of our business is done through e-commerce. And so a lot of what we are working on right now, we're doing a carbon assessment, carbon inventory of our scope 1 and scope 2 for North America is where we're starting. We've actually just about finished that. From there, we're going to jump into our global footprint, scope 1, scope 2, and then our scope 3s, because we're starting small. Our scope 1s for North America weren't crazy bad, but if you've done a carbon inventory, scope 3 is a big hairy beast, and we have a pretty involved supply chain, both upstream and downstream. Once we determine that, I am fairly confident that the organization is going to be very interested in how we can take steps to reduce that. We've tied the story to them that our impact on carbon and the climate directly impacts our ability to produce our products. If we can't grow our botanicals, we can't get product out the door, and we are directly impacting that through our carbon emissions. But we are also, I've been very fortunate that our leadership is very open to the idea of us working with other organizations, even those within our industry, to better every organization. Our new leadership's a little more is a little more hesitant to share everything, just because they don't know, they came from outside the MLM industry, and so I'm still working with them on that. But a big example of this is we are, one of the members of the Utah Sustainable Business Coalition, along with one of our two or three of our direct competitors that are parts of this coalition. And within that coalition, the whole purpose is to share information to help each other out. We're not going to go in there and share every single little detail of what we're doing, but I can share a high level and talk about, we did this with our suppliers, and we've done this analysis, or, we're finding that if we're moving towards this product, this sort of packaging, we're noticing these benefits. And I think that's key to us actually, creating an impact. We talk a lot about some of the solutions through project drawdown, and those are all going to require a group effort. So I hope that answers a little bit of your question there, Zach. Full-time employees, Young Living has about 3,000 full-time employees globally. We're between 3,000 and 4,000, depending on the season. We have a lot of seasonal employees, obviously, during the summer and the fall for our harvest times.
Thanks.
Of course. Great question.
There we go.
So I'll jump to one of the next topics, and we can obviously, like I said, we can come back to some of these other things. But one of the next subjects here, questions here is, how do we engage with our employees, managers, and customers in challenges? Since we have such a small team, I rely on very heavily other employees, managers, and even customers for feedback, for engagement on a lot of our projects. The idea is if I can create a champion, sustainability champion in every single organization, or every single cross-line organization within the company, also my team is huge, and I get all these employees that they don't necessarily report to me, but they're going to champion all of our projects. And the first thing we did is we met them where they were. Steve alluded to this, is we did a lot of surveys just to ask our employees about a broad arrangement, or a broad assortment of topics, from zero waste to carbon to we talked about, and of course my mind fails me, some conservation, because we did a lot of conservation. We did community involvement or community service projects. We talked about I said conservation of species, but also of environment, so plants and animals, both flora and fauna, and we pulled them on a number of topics to get their feedback as best we could. Long story short, we found a lot of employees are very, very interested in these topics, but a lot of them have no idea where to begin. They may recycle at home, or maybe they try and take the bus to work. We have a select few that are able to afford a Tesla that were noted on there, but other than that, everybody's just, I try and recycle at home, or I try and not drive as much. So based on the results of the survey, we were then able to craft an employee engagement calendar, to where we had projects throughout the entire year, whether that's a webinar like this. We did a lot of webinars the last 2 years, but our big kind of major project is Earth Day, which is what this picture is. Earth Day 2019, we made a corporate holiday. We closed operations on that day, and we organized over 30 different projects all over the Wasatch Front and some of our other global markets, so that employees could go and participate in a service project of some sort. So we've done a lot of tree plantings, trail cleanups, habitat rehabilitations. We've done some community like litter cleanups, plugging or those type of things. We adopted some sections of highway in Utah. I think there were 4 sections of highway we adopted and did some cleaning, waterway cleanings, all sorts of things. And the feedback was extremely positive. The employees loved it. I mean, obviously they have a day off work, but they loved getting their hands dirty and doing something. So following up to this, we've actually given employees a floating holiday. They can have 1 PTO day a year of their choosing to go and do some sort of a service project. And it's been a great success. Employees love it. And you don't have to go and take the entire day to your service project. If you want to schedule a service project for a few hours in the morning, you still get the day off. It's just each manager individually will approve the PTO request. We have a guideline that we wrote that gives them an idea of projects they can do. If they have a question, they can come right to my team and ask about it, and we'll go through and vet them one by one if we need to. We've only vetted 2 so far. Everything else has been running pretty smoothly. On top of this, we also created an advisory board. We call it our Green Advisory Team. The whole idea is this is a group of very passionate individuals from across the organization, all sorts of areas of the organization, where we bring them together once a quarter, and we run through all of the sustainability initiatives we have going, give them status updates, talk about proposed ideas, get feedback from them on all of our projects, because they're quote unquote on the front lines, and they give us a pulse of what the organization is feeling. And they've been able to help guide a lot of the projects where we say, hey, here's what's going on, here's what we wanted to do. And they can either say, oh, that's a great idea, or that doesn't resonate as well with the organization. We don't think, what if we tweaked it this way or changed into this project? One of the cool projects that's risen out of that we're actually right in the midst of right now is creating an employee garden. So we have a lot of land there in Lehigh that's just sitting unused at the moment. And rather than just have it, accumulate tumbleweed or sagebrush, we're actually going to be planting, I think, 30 garden beds that the employees will be able to rent out and then do their own gardens. We have a lot that commute from the Salt Lake Valley. They don't have their own land to do a garden in. And so they'll be able to reserve a bed for the year and do some gardening. And then we'll have a reflection area where they can just go out and enjoy the environment. And this is all assuming, obviously, that we're in the office a little more next spring. But we have a lot of positive feedback on this. People are super excited for it. We talk about, we as an organization are farmers. And so this is going to be a great way to display people's green thumbs and get them excited. On top of that, we do, like I said, we've done a lot of education events. We'll bring in different organizations and do different webinars. If you're familiar with like the Utah Recycling Alliance, I sit on the board of the Utah Recycling Alliance as well. And we've done a couple of the fix-it clinics. We've had people come in and bring in clothing that needs to be repaired, and brought in some of the coaches that help them understand how to repair these clothing items, and they can repair them rather than just throw them away and buy something new. And we've had some good success with that. Employers are excited about that type of thing. And then finally, we have an internal employee recognition tool that we've been able to work with our HR group and throw in some of the environmental practices into that recognition tool, and employees can recognize each other for doing great things.
Devin, I have to ask, is there a way that you can gauge how employees who are excited about doing service projects, how they engage when they're, producing product and dealing with sustainability issues there as best as you've conceived them, whether it's recycling or water conservation or looking at more organic materials in your packaging? I just made that up. Social justice in the community. I mean, what I'm saying is, if you've expanded employee awareness and excitement, with one activity, can you tell if it's translating to anything else, or is it more the managers of these employees need to kind of drink the Kool-Aid that your team's drinking to do more sustainability?
No, great question. A little of both. We can tell it's been translating. In fact, when we launched this initiative 2 years ago, we also launched we use Teams, Microsoft Suite Teams, for our internal communication tool. And we launched it's called our Global Stewards page to get people involved. And so that's one of our main hubs of information. Is we invited anybody that wanted to join the team. It wasn't compulsory, or wasn't required, but voluntary. And we have a lot of people that will throw ideas in there and just say, hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? And it ebbs and flows, but right after these projects, we get a lot of feedback. People come back and be like, hey, what if we did this at work? Or what if I did this in my job area? We first launched this, we had a woman in one of our facilities that at the time we didn't have a solution for glass recycling. So she, on her own accord, set up bins around the building for collecting glass. We have a lot of the little balls of oil that people will use up at their desk. And before they were tossing them, she started collecting them, and she would bring them to the facility that could recycle glass, just because she was so excited. And so those are the type of things that we've tried to highlight and hold on to and drive. But yes, we've even seen it in people's work. It was an employee that came up with the garden idea. Said, hey, what about this? And so we took that idea and ran with it. for sure.
Well, I know Liz is going through the same or similar graduate program you went through, and something tells me there must be something in one of those courses about building a sustainability culture. And it's like, that's really fun to read about. You read about how other people do it, but I mean, you're really doing it, and that's where it really happens. So
yeah,
appreciate you being on, being courageous enough to tell the story.
Well, absolutely. And Zach, you asked a little bit about the recognition tools. We have two ways that we do this recognition. We use it's called Power and Us. I believe it's by OC Tanner out of Salt Lake. We use that internal recognition tool, and so people can send it's like a little e-card, a recognition piece, and they get an allotment of some points they can send, and the points end up translating into a wallet where you can purchase things. I'm not in love with the purchasing of it because a lot of it is stuff that may or may not be the best choice in your life in terms of environmental sustainability, but it's a great opportunity for public recognition or private recognition, whatever you choose. The second thing that we do is we actually have an internal wellness program that employees track their weekly habits in terms of wellness, and then those translate again into points that we can redeem for company product. Part of that wellness tracker is we submit monthly challenges in there in terms of sustainability, whether it's, are you going to take the bus, a few days a week, or eliminate a trip from your driving a few days a week? Are you going to, commit to using a reusable container for your lunches or your water? Are you going to something as simple as turn the lights off in your house whenever you're not in the room to conserve electricity, or bump your thermostat down a few degrees, or turn it up a few degrees depending on the season, things like that. So it's nothing groundbreaking, but I think it's just a combination of all of them are trying to drive that culture a little bit more. So I know we're coming up here on the hour, so I want to also leave some time for discussion, if that's okay, Steve. That work?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if we have another slide here.
I've got a couple more here. So, this is another example of some of the employee engagement. So 2020 came and we were trying to plan our project, our Earth Day project again, where we were going to try and get people the time off. And ultimately the decision was made, to be the safest for employees. We decided not to get big groups together. So we had some leftover budget, and instead of just, holding on to that or doing something with it, we said, hey, let's do something really cool to recognize our employees. So we worked with the Arbor Day Foundation, and we ended up planting a tree in Utah for every single employee.
Wow.
And this is an example of the certificate we were able to send out to them and say, hey, guess what? We weren't able to get together, but here's something we've done for you because we value you as an employee, wanted to do something that's long lasting. So in your name, we've planted a tree in the Fish Lake National Forest in central Utah. So a lot of, I literally had employees in tears saying thank you. They were so excited because it was something meaningful to them, but it wasn't just like, here's another random object you may or may not use. So it was a great success for us. That was one of my favorite projects to do because we had people so excited about it. And it was something that they didn't expect.
That sounds like a great, thanks for that advertisement. We ought to let people know. I didn't know the Arbor Day Foundation necessarily worked with, of course I should realize they work with corporate partners. I'm assuming that they plant the kind of tree that belongs in that forest.
Yes. So that's one of the questions I asked them a lot about. The Arbor Day Foundation rep is somebody I met at a Green Biz conference a few years ago, and I've kept in really close contact with them. And so that was one of the questions I wanted to make sure is, are they going to be the right tree for there, or is it just like dropping some seeds and saying, hey, we planted a tree, even though it's a seed? And these are actually 2-year-old saplings that they're planting with the Forest Service that are going through some of the places where the bark beetle destroyed all the conifer trees. They're planting new conifer. So it was a really cool project. Where possible, they either, if they're not partnering with the Forest Service, they try and partner with local nonprofits. So Tree Utah is one of their favorite partners in Utah. And I like working with Tree Utah because part of Arbor Day's requirements and Tree Utah's is that wherever they work, the group that they're doing the planting for has to have a 3-year mitigation plan in place, or not a mitigation, but a care plan in place for each tree to ensure its survival over the next 3 years, which is a big deal. That means that their success rate of that tree living is like 80 or 90%, somewhere high 80s, I think.
And that's really
incredible. And
that's really important in an urban setting, and a lot of organizations like Tree Utah are working with government entities, and yeah, they do need to make a commitment to maintain that's part of the public infrastructure. And
yep. So
the trees do.
Go ahead and hit the next slide there, if you would, please. That picture of the sign there. So I'm going to jump to, since we're talking a little bit about some of the nonprofits we've worked with. One of the questions here is, how do we work with nonprofits, governments, commercial partners, et cetera? This is one of the examples of us working with a nonprofit that I feel is just, it's core to who we are as an organization. And I love that I can build off this. So we have a farm out in Tabiona, Utah. It's out near Duchesne, Eastern Utah, about 2.5 hours away from us here on the Wasatch Front. We, working with the Nature Conservancy 2 years ago, donated a chunk of land. It was a sizable chunk of land and made it a conservation easement, calling it the D. Gary Young Wildlife Sanctuary after our late founder. It was an area that is farmland, but we decided to make it a conservation easement as well so that it can never be developed. It's actually, without giving too much into it, they call it the Serengeti of Utah because of the wildlife corridors through there and how vital it is to the wildlife in that area. There was no tax or monetary benefit to the organization for doing this. That's the big thing we had asked is, what was your tax break? There was actually no tax break on this one at all. We donated the land because that's something that our founder would have done. And it's a great opportunity to work with a partner. We try and do, we vet our partners pretty strenuously on those we choose to work with, that they also echo our same why, our same purpose and mission. And the Nature Conservancy is one of those that we felt would be an excellent partner for this project. Same with, like I said, the Arbor Day Foundation we worked with. There's a couple other nonprofits that we support as well, the same type of thing that they've gone through our process to vet. And I already hit on this a little bit, but I talked a little bit about some of the coalitions and the other groups we're part of. But it's my personal belief and the organization's belief that, we are going to have to work together to tackle some of these large issues. We've already talked about, climate change. That's something that nobody in a vacuum is going to solve. It's going to take a huge, massive combined effort. And so that's been our viewpoint whenever we're working with a partner, is that we need to work together to make real impact, real change. And so we have that same idea with a lot of our partners, our vendors and our supply chain, some great vendors that are huge multinational organizations that we've been able to leverage some of their things. UPS is one of our major carriers. We're working with them on some of their carbon offset programs. We use Sealed Air. That's another vendor for void fill material. I get a lot of feedback from consumers saying, hey, we need to do paper void fill, not those air pillows, because that's a lot of plastic. And so we went to our vendor and said, hey, here's the feedback. And they said, you know what? We get that same feedback. Let's talk about it. And so they came in, brought their group in, and they have done a huge analysis on the different void fill materials. And they presented all the data to us and said, here's the data. Here's what we found in terms of cost, weight, efficiency, total carbon footprint over the life cycle of the materials. Make a decision based off this. And we worked with them, hand in hand on those type of things. And it's been, super beneficial to our organization that we can be able to then go to our consumer and say, guess what? We've done this analysis and here's why we're using this. Again, that goes back to that storytelling we've talked about, but being able to help them understand, here's why we've gone with this option. And here's the impact to it. A lot of people don't look at the whole story. They're just looking at that little snippet, and plastic is bad. Some plastic is bad, but preserving the value of it is a better option.
Great. So should I attempt to do the stop share here?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, let's see what happens. Oh my goodness, we're all here.
Hey, works.
So the last topic that we have, and we're certainly open to other questions, but I get the impression that at least Liz, I don't know about Sarah and Steve, would like to be someone like you, Deven, and Zach, I guess, is a chief sustainability officer at his company when they move along in their career. And for the people that are going to look at this online as a legacy. So people must ask you this all the time. So how do you become you, and how do you do it without working 15 years for a company doing something else, or 11 years, or you worked at Young Living a long time.
Yeah.
Step.
So I don't have all the answers, but I'll from my experience, here's some of the things that have helped. Ask questions. So like I said, my position's been in existence for 3 years. Before that, there was no team focused on what I'm doing. And it took a couple of folks, myself and one other, to ask some questions to the organization to say, hey, is this an important topic for us? If it is, what are your thoughts on having this position existing in the company to spearhead these projects? And it only took a couple of times of asking for them to be like, yeah, it's important. We do need to do this. What do we do? And at that point, I had a plan in place. I had it ready to come and say, hey, here's my proposal. And I was able to run with it. Had I not asked, I don't think it would have happened this way. We may still be doing what we're doing without somebody driving this. I don't know. So that's the big one is have the courage to ask and to put yourself out there for that. Next thing obviously is networking. I've networked with some incredible people for the last 5 years that have been put in my path for one reason or another. Like this, conversation with Steve, it was through some different connections we met, and have been able to continue to drive this conversation. The coalition groups that I'm part of, same thing. I've met some amazing people that, this industry, I think, is unique in that everybody's willing to help everybody. I don't think there's that competitive cutthroat nature here to where they're like, oh, you might be my competitor for this role or for this company. I'm not going to share any information with you. My personal experience has been that people are very willing to talk and to share as much information as they possibly can. I think we're in the unique line of work that whatever benefit we find is going to benefit everybody else as a whole. And so I think they're very open to be doing that. Some of my other thoughts, service opportunities. Like I said, I sit on 3 different boards right now of different groups, 2 nonprofits and 1 city board that are all discussing sustainability initiatives. Utah has a fairly small community, so there's a lot of cross-pollination between all those boards and folks that are all interconnected. But again, it's through those things that we're able to share and benefit each other. So Young Living is in Lehigh. I sit on a board with Lehigh City, and we're already talking about some projects that we can do to bring glass recycling into the community when there's not that option right now. And it's just been through these board opportunities, these service opportunities that those have come up, those have arisen, and it's great. And then the last thing that I would say in terms of my experience have been a great benefit is different education opportunities. There's a lot of groups out there currently offering free intro opportunities to things. Green Biz is a big one. A lot of free content from Green Biz if you want to start learning about circular economy, about ESG, about carbon, about zero waste. I mean, they have different tracks that you can dive into. Earth Academy is one that I've done a bunch of stuff through, a lot of reporting with to GRI or CDP or any of those reporting structures you can do. Some of the local community school or local colleges around have started offering some courses that I've looked into. So there's all sorts of opportunities there. Big one that I'll put a plug in that's coming up in March is the Intermountain Sustainability Summit done by Weber State. That's March, I think 17th and 18th. Great opportunity to network and see what organizations are doing. So yeah, that's my take on it, obviously. So any other questions from there?
Can't believe I'm looking and watching the chat. Don't you folks have some questions or suggestions here? Liz might be typing.
And feel free to unmute if you want to ask a question that way too. That's not a problem.
I think Zach is trapped in a quiet zone, but
our next sustainability program. So I have kind of 3 major areas of focus for the next 3 years. Waste and carbon. I've grouped those together because we talked about waste, and so carbon emissions is a waste for us. So we've done a lot in terms of zero waste. That's kind of how our goal started. We're currently in the process, almost done, certifying our distribution center to be 90% zero waste to landfill or higher. We're working with a group called SCS Global on that. Like I said, we're doing our carbon inventories. From there, we'll be able to announce some reduction goals, but I can't announce reduction goals if I don't know where I'm at in terms of that. So that's the first area we're focused on. Second area is product packaging. We're always looking at our product packaging, even though we did an analysis last year as we're part of the Sustainable Packaging Coalition. They have some great tools, great platforms to look at your packaging. And I think as of right now, around 70% of what ships out our door is either easily recyclable or partially recyclable in curbside. So that's to most folks that get the product. So right now we're looking at some of the low-hanging fruit there. How can we reduce the materials sent out, or how can we introduce pre or post-consumer recycled content into that packaging before we tackle some of the harder stuff? That non-recyclable material that's going out, A lot of that's very difficult. There's not even solutions on the market yet, or if they are, they're in test phase and nothing of mass that we can put out there. So that's the second area. Third area is focused on our farming and regenerative farming techniques and bringing some more consistency to that. Like I said, we have our corporate-owned farms, but then we also have some partner farms that we've done some exclusive partnership deals with. And then we have our third-party suppliers. So we're focused on our corporate farms, then we'll move into our suppliers, and then down the road into our partners, then into our suppliers. That's where we're at.
Waiting for Steve and Sarah to see if we can get some engagement here. This is a special opportunity for you folks.
Drip irrigation. So it's a good question. Like I was saying, the drip irrigation project stemmed from looking at water. And so when we look at how we're doing our current watering system, that broadcast sprayer as opposed to drip, we started to look at soil saturation, how much water was saturated in soil, how deep, how long in between waterings. That was a big part of the analysis behind that. And then as the quantity used per plant type of thing, it's a little harder to determine that if you're using a big broadcast sprayer. But there's some we can look at per acre or things like that. I don't know what else you're wanting to know on that. Other than that, that's where it's at. We're kind of half and half right now. Yeah, scalable is the question as of right now, potentially. It comes down to, again, like hardware maintenance. Will the maintenance of that make sense, or we're gonna have to be replacing every single drip line every year? That's an incredible amount of waste. So trying to figure out if we can put a solution that's a little more permanent in place. As of right now, not sure on the scale on the final piece of that. Like I said, we're about half and half watering right now, doing some testing of that. Hopefully we'll be able to move into that soon. I'm just waiting results of that.
See if anything else pops up here. And of course, I may have mentioned at the top of this, but several people on this call get the P3 Utah newsletter, and hopefully others that would like to get it will let me know. But we'll be doing a lot more of this next year. We're going to start a membership program, doing a better job with our sharing. There's a lot of opportunities in Utah, I think, to promote. Some of it's kind of subtle, but promote incentives for triple bottom line business, encouraging businesses to adopt, become a benefit LLC or benefit corporation. I'm always glad to visit with anybody that has a candidate company that wants to look into that. It's a great way to stand out in the marketplace. I think the Sustainable Business Coalition is working with State of Utah and others to talk about purchasing incentives. I don't think Utah is ready to give a big tax incentive. I think all of us know that the federal government's not ready to give a big tax incentive for sustainability, although depending on politics, it could happen. In the meantime, purchasing incentives, giving triple bottom line companies a leg up in plan reviews, some of those things, these are possible and some of these exist. P3 Utah helps Salt Lake City with a purchasing incentive. Not many people know about it. So if you're a benefit company, benefit LLC or benefit corporation, you can get kind of a tiebreaker situation going on bids with Salt Lake City purchasing. Something I think the state of Utah might be ready to get involved with. I think government is interested in this triple bottom line idea. They're very supportive of private leadership to make progress. That's why what Deven's doing is so important, what Zach's trying to do. So I think some of it's going to come from people like you, Deven, and your colleagues. What would be fair, but the government already gives a lot of incentives, a lot of support to different kinds of businesses. And there's no reason why we couldn't add into that. Hey, you want to do aerospace, you want to help tourism, maybe you should help those companies that are trying to, make a more sustainable environment and a more just world. If you're going to use government money to support a business.
Utah's interesting in that they don't like to legislate a lot of this yet.
Not
I
yet.
think they're looking at other states to see what's working and what's not before they do that. But yeah, they're definitely relying on the private sector or individuals to push a lot of this for sure.
So, places like the Sustainable Business Coalition, P3 Utah, we certainly are open to suggestions on an interest in advocacy, just as it takes people like you, people on this call, to people like Deven, to step up and dare to suggest and inquire whether a company wants to do more for people on the planet. We kind of have to do that for our government officials. They're very responsive when the private sector speaks, and we all participate one way or another in the private sector.
So a couple other questions came up here, Steve.
Good.
So Liz,
budget.
You asked about DEI initiatives. Absolutely part of what we're doing. It's not my exact team. So give you a quick background. When I created this organization a couple of years ago, it was on my roadmap down the road to create a larger CSR group, to where we could have somebody focused on DEI. We had environmental sustainability. We'll have philanthropic work, all these things underneath that house. The organization wasn't ready to create that yet, but that's actually in the process right now. So we are partnering with our HR group, as well as a newly formed CSR team. That's right now a team of one, working with that individual to create a lot more policy around DEI. I mean, we have our hiring policies and our non-discriminatory policies, but on top of that, we want to do a lot more with community and employee involvement. But that's about all I have on that right now. It's on the radar, but we're not down the road very far on that. Budget. I can't give a number, but I can say in terms of CapEx, I don't have much. I've actually had to rely a lot on other organizations, other teams within the organization, and say, okay, what are you doing? What, if we wanted to tackle this project, what kind of budget would you have to put towards that? I personally have not had much budget at all to do these big projects, which has been really frustrating, but it's also just because the entire organization has been, like I said, going through this leadership change. They've been very cautious with just throwing out budget on it, on all sorts of things. And so some of the projects, like I mentioned, our employee gardens, all of the capital expenditure for that is coming from our facilities team. They were very happy to do it, but they said, Deven, your team's going to have to do all the managing of this and make sure that, people are getting to their garden, figuring out how to reserve it, make sure they're weeding it, all the education. I said, my team will happily take that on if you pay for it all. And they said, yeah, great. And so we've actually, a lot of our projects have come like that. It's been kind of nice that I don't have to worry about, somebody came in and say, hey, how come you spend all this money? I'd say, well, it's that team, but anyway, it's been nice. So I also have the question about contact info. I'll just put my contact info in the chat here in a minute, and then you're welcome to contact me. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Please connect with me for sure.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead. Somebody asked for a copy of the slides. There's a few people on this call. I can do that. It's also be recorded. I'm going to put out one more call for questions or comments, but while we're doing that, since people like to type while I'm talking, I just want to congratulate Steve and Liz and Sarah and Zach. There's just a few of you, but this has been the most engaged webinar we've had the whole year. You may not feel like you've done a lot, but you have, and we appreciate your engagement. It's a big deal. It's what we all want in our human life now, is an engagement, and you've done it today. Thank you for your time. Maybe it's because Deven's such a powerful guy. And so motivating and stimulating to visit with. Maybe that's it.
Careful, I won't be able to fit out the door with a big head if you keep talking like that.
All right, so we may have to get Zach on one of these pretty soon. He's doing some interesting things too. So, okay, anything else, Deven? If not, we're going to wrap this up. Let everybody have an extra 10 minutes of their life,
That's it for me. I've talked enough, but be happy to talk offline with anybody for sure.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me pitch in a little bit today. And, may the great pumpkin bring all of you whatever your heart's desire. Hopefully it's a more sustainable world, a great holiday season. Thank you so much for participating in this Impact Hub, P3 Utah, and Viridescent supported webinar with Deven. And Deven, thank you again for sharing and telling us about what you're trying to do. And You have so much to do, but you're getting so much done. It's quite inspirational. Thank you for being you. It was a great day.
Thanks, Steve. My pleasure. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks, both of you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Stephen, for hosting us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Take care.
See y'all.
Bye, everyone.